The 27th Vintage Sports Car Festival at Lime Rock Park, Connecticut. All photos taken during practice on September 4th, 2009. Photos and narration by Tom Hildreth. This is a 1926 Bugatti T35. Here we see a 1929 Bugatti T37A. This car was powered by a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder single overhead cam 3-valve per cylinder engine of about 85 horsepower. Here's a 1931 Bugatti T37. Another shot of the 1931 Bugatti T37. There seems to be plenty of room in the engine compartment on this car. Here's a grill close-up of the 1931 Bugatti T37. And this is a 1930 Morgan Trike, a V-twin powered vehicle with the engine out front, as you can see. Here's a 1931 Morgan Trike. And this is a 1932 Plymouth Sprinter. And the 1932 Plymouth Sprinter on the track. This is a 1934 MG NA. And here's a 1934 Morgan Trike. Again, a V-twin powered vehicle. And as you can see, they were produced for quite a long time period. And another shot of the 1934 Morgan Trike. This is a 1934 Reuter V8 Special, probably a Ford-powered car. Here's a 1935 Amilcar Ford. A 1938 Morgan Trike. And a 1938 Riley Special. 1939 Ford Sprinter. And here's another Sprinter. Here's a 1939 MG TB. The MG series goes back well into the 30s, and they have a rather dated looking design. And here's a 1939 MG TB. Number 704 in this picture is another 1939 MG TB. And here's a 1948 Leicester MG. Apparently an MG platform with a more aerodynamic and modern looking shape placed on it. Perhaps other equipment of specialized nature was also included. Here's a 1949 Jaguar XK120. The 120 indicated a top speed of 120 miles an hour, which was pretty good for the relatively small engines on these vehicles. Here's a 1949 MG Special. You can see the bodywork on this car is different than the standard MG. It looks a bit more modern. I don't know what type this is. My suspicions are that it's an Indy 500 racer, probably from the 1930s. That's my best guess anyways. It seems to be a 6-cylinder vehicle. Or maybe a 12-cylinder vehicle. Here's a 1949 MGTC. This car is a 1950 Aston Martin DB2, originally powered by a 105 horsepower 4-cylinder Lagonda engine. In 1951, a version of this car came in third at Le Mans. Here's a 1950 MGTD. Boasting only 54 horsepower, this car was important to the birth of the sports car genre in post-World War II America. Here's a 1951 Fraser Nash, powered by a 2-liter inline 6-cylinder engine. In the post-World War II era, only 79 Fraser Nash cars were built, so you can see that getting to see one perform on the racetrack is a rare treat. Here's a close-up of the 1951 Fraser Nash. And here's a 1951 Jaguar XK120. A 1952 Devon MG, fairly streamlined. You can see from this color shot, a sporty looking car. This is a 1952 Porsche 356. A 1953 Hansgen Jaguar. Here's an Austin Healey 100 from the 1950s. And in this case, 100 meant a top speed of 100 miles an hour. Was hoped for anyways. And here's an MG looking at us with an interesting pair of headlights. This is an MGTC. 10,000 of these cars were made between 1945 and 49, and many were imported to America. Here's another MGTC. The Series 4 and 5 Morgan were built through the 1960s. To me, they always looked quite a bit like an MG, but the production figures on these cars did not match those of the MG series. This is an Austin Healey 3000. These cars were produced between 1959 and 1968, and they first appeared with a 3-liter engine of 124 horsepower. Here's an Austin Healey 100, another car from the 1950s. And here's another Austin Healey 100. Here we see a 1954 Aston Martin DB2. This is an Alfa Romeo Giulietta Spider, produced between 1955 and 1962, a popular car. The term Spider indicates that it is a topless car, that is to say, it has no metalwork on the top. It is not a coupe. And here's another Alfa Romeo Giulietta Spider. This is a 1954 Jaguar XK120. The 12,078 examples of this British car were produced between 1948 and 1954. This neat little car is a 1955 Abarth 207A. Only a couple of dozen of these cars were produced. This is an Aston Martin DB3S. Here's a 1955 Lancia D50. Here we have a 1956 Porsche 356 and a 1957 Lotus 11. Here we see a 1957 Morgan. And here's a 1957 Triumph TR3, the first mass-produced car to have front disc brakes in 1956. This is a 1958 Allard GT. A 1958 Elva Mark V. This is a 1958 Lotus 23. A 1958 Porsche 356. And a 1959 Austin Healey 100. Here's a 1959 Elva Courier. And a 1959 Lister Jaguar. This is a modified Jaguar that I understand was quite successful. The yellow car here is a 1959 Lola, and it seems to be in contention with a Lotus 7 in the background. Here's a 1959 Lotus 11. A 1959 Lotus 7. And a 1959 Morgan. Here's a 1959 Oscar, powered by a 746cc engine. These cars were produced by three Maserati brothers who had split from the original firm. This is a 1959 Filson Falcon, and I've been able to learn nothing about this particular car. This is a Stanguellini Formula Junior, powered by an 1100cc Fiat engine. And here's a 1959 Stanguellini Formula Junior, a classic-looking race car. This is a 1959 Watson Indy 500 car, a roadster. And here's another view of the 1959 Watson Indy 500. Here we see a 1960 Aston Martin DB4. And another view of a 1960 Aston Martin DB4. Here's a Triumph TR3. And you can see in the background the park-like setting that this racetrack occupies. A very pretty racetrack. This sleek blue job, I do not know what type it is. This is a 1960 Porsche 356B and a 1961 Elva Mark VII. Out of the 1961 Elva Mark VII. A small car, as you can see, comparing it to the driver. And here's a 1961 Lotus 7. As you can tell, these were popular cars. And another Lotus 7. And yet another. And another. This wild-looking machine is a mystery to me. I do not know what type it is. This is a Lotus 23. And here's an MGB. The MGA and MGB were body styles that were much more modern than the previous MGs. This is a 1962 Cooper and a 1962 Jaguar XKE and another 1962 Jaguar XKE. Behind the front wheel you'll see a white label affixed HRG 5, that's Historic Racing Group 5. And in front of the rear wheel, the SCCA is the Sports Car Club of America. This is a 1963 Brabham BT2, a 1964 MGB hardtop. This is a 1964 Ginetta G4. 500 of these fiberglass cars were produced between 1964 and 1968, and they were powered by a British Ford engine. Here's a 1964 Corvette. And the Shelby Cobra, perhaps the best known mating of a British platform with an American V8. I believe the first V8 put in this car was a Ford 260, and then the famous Ford 289, and in the end the Ford 427 was wedged into this platform and was resulted in what has become one of the most copied cars in the world. There are many fiberglass versions of this car available. It is probably still in production in that form today. This is a 1965 Lola T70. And here we have an Argo, a car that reminds me of a bumper car. I don't know anything else about it, but it has that look to me. Here's a 1965 Lotus 23. And here we see an Austin Cooper S. Seems to have a Union Jack on the roof. A 1966 Jaguar XKE. And a 1966 Ford Mustang. Here's a mid-60s Ford Mustang. And a 1966 Porsche, model 911, I believe. Here's another Porsche, also a model 911. And another Porsche. And a 1966 Shelby GT350. This was the Carroll Shelby version of the Ford Mustang. Here's a Corvette, late 60s body style, I would say. And another Corvette, a little bit earlier. This is probably a 65, 64. And another shot of that Corvette on the track. Here's a 1969 Corvette. And another 1969 Corvette. I believe the previous car had Pontiac wheels. And here's a 1969 Ford GT40, an iconic car that has been copied in fiberglass many times and is probably still available if you have the money for it. Here's a 1969 Royale. And here we see a Datsun Sports 2000. These cars were produced from 1967 to 1970, and they were a little ahead of their time in that they were powered by a 2-liter engine with a 5-speed transmission. They were quite popular. This is a 1970 Chevron B19 and a 1970 Corvette. Here we have a 1970 Merlin open-wheeled racer. And here's a series of unknown type open-wheeled racer. This is number 9, number 11, number 31, number 57, and this one, which appears to be a bit older than the others, number 94. This is a sleek-looking 1970 Royale. And this is a 1971 Chevron B19. And here's a 1971 Chevron B21. As you can see from this photo, these cars are basically a wedge shape for aerodynamic purposes, of course. Here's a 1972 Porsche 911. Another 1972 Porsche 911. And yet another 1972 Porsche 911. This open-wheel car is a 1972 Tidal Mark VI. And back to the Chevrons. This is a 1972 B23. Here's a 1973 Chevron B26. And another shot of the 1973 Chevron B26. This interesting looking car is a 1973 Lotus Europa. Although it seems almost to look like a pickup truck, it's a mid-engine car, and the space in the back is where the engine is located. Here's a 1973 Porsche 911. A 1975 Crossley 30F open-wheel racer. And this is a 1975 Taj. I'm not sure what class these cars came from, if they were part of the Can-Am series or some other class, I'm not sure. They're a spectacular looking car with beautiful paint schemes, but I know nothing of their background. This is a 1976 Lola T286. And this car, which looks a bit like a dragster to me, is a 1976 Malik Mark 27. Here's a 1979 Lola 333. And another unknown open-wheeled racer type. This is a 1980 Lola T590. And another shot of the 1980 Lola T598. These cars, as you can see, look very aerodynamic in their shape, almost like a ground effects vehicle. Here's a 1985 Lola T590. And a 1985 Swift. And this is the end. Thank you for watching.